What's going on, guys? Welcome to episode 3 of this free 3D modeling course. And if you're looking at this ugly thing, it just means you've learned about most of the tools in edit mode. There's a lot more theory when it comes to modifier stacking and topology and basic 3D modeling principles, but you've got the basics down. So I think we can genuinely start picking up the pace and start creating our model. So I'm going to delete our special little guy here. I'm not obsessed with him anymore. I'm going to press Shift A and look for an image, and I want to add our reference image. For the EXP S3, I want to get the front, left, right, and back, so I'll hunt for those names. It looks like I'm going to press 1 and make sure we're in front view, and I'll go ahead and add that again. So I'm not too concerned about the size or exact position of it right now. I just want to make sure I'm now going into the right view with my numpad. I just want to make sure I get these images in here first, and we can manually scale them all in. So if I could read, I would find that the right is right over here. And we might need to flip these around and re-rotate them, but it's totally okay. I'll press 9 to get the opposite view, which is the left. And I'm looking for the left. Let's add that. And now I can press 1 to go in the front, and press 9, and press Shift A, go to reference, and I'm going to hunt for the back. Cool. So these are a similar size. Let's move these just a little. And I want to make sure that they're lined up as close as I can. It's totally okay that it's not perfect. I think perfection is the enemy of progress. We're here for all skill levels. So as you can see, I'm moving these around with G. I'm scaling them just as if it were a cube. And I'm just trying to see if I can eyeball them being at the floor level. And we can go to the image tab that popped up over here, and I can click on opacity and bring it down if I need to. I can do that for any of these images. And I'm just going to bring them down a little bit. And we're only going to use 2 at a time, otherwise our viewport will be covered in reference images. But it's still best to at least get them all set up so we don't have to worry about this later. These are all pretty good looking. So let's check out the front. If that's the front, then I want to be actually staring at this front image, right? We'll notice that these are flipped right now in the wrong direction. So we can actually grab both of these and press SX or SY and -1. And so then I would grab this one. And if I were at the back side, I'd want a cube with Shift A and cube to be in front of that. But I would have to hide this front view, and I could start modeling around that. So we're not going to obsess over the individual, microscopic proportions of these. This is to learn about modeling. If I unhide and we imagine this as the front now, and now we're modeling it in front, we would then go to the side and we would see that things would eventually line up the way we need it. What I could do to make sure things line up perfectly as well is rotate the side images too, and just try to get all the heights as close as I can. So I'll delete our cube for now. And I'm checking to see where these images meet the floor for the bottom of this object. We can kind of check that out with the opacity, but I'm not going for the most microscopically perfect implementation. It looks like we got it really close though. See where that little image lines up. So we know these were our side images. So let's grab them, press RZ90, and they're back at the side. So if I'm not mistaken, again, we can flip back and forth between these two, and actually we're going to switch places with these ones. So even though this is the right side, like I said, we want to be able to put a cube in front and be able to view what we're doing. So unhide all those, and it looks like we have finally got our reference images in place. The reference images are a bit of a battle of attrition. Once you have these set up, I'm going to go ahead and open PureRef. And now as I'm working, I still have access to these other images in case I'm wondering what exactly I'm looking at. And so, this isn't a totally mental free effort. There is some effort when it comes to interpreting how these images are building the 3D form, but I totally believe in you. So what we'll do is we'll hide the technically left one. We'll hide the technically back one. And I feel like I want to stare at the front and right most often for now. So let's actually rename the images that we need to before we get started and practice with our outliner. I'll go ahead and rename this one right, this one front. We can use Alt-H to unhide objects. And I'll call this left, and I'll call this back. really quick, the only other selection tools we probably might have missed out on is hiding. So if I hide something, I'll press H. If I want to unhide something, I'll press Alt H. And if I want to isolate something, I'll press Shift H. So Alt H to bring all of those back. And then the other selection tool that I use is by pressing the hotkey C, and that is the circle selection. So if I have a bunch of objects in my scene, I can just start selecting things with my circle, and I can change the radius with my scroll wheel. So again, we'll hide these two. We'll add a cube, and we'll practice our first implementation of the mirror modifier to get this set up. We'll unmirror it later so we can get some different details on the other side. So with the cube perfectly in the middle of the world origin, what I would do is go into edit mode, and I would add a loop cut directly in the center. So I'll add a loop cut, left click, and then right click. So it's perfectly in the center. Then I'll go into X-ray mode, go to the front, press X, and that side is gone. And so the first thing I would want to add, unlike our last demo, is the mirror modifier. Later on, we'll add the subdivision surface modifier. In that last demo, I had the sub D go first, but it's really recommended to have the mirror go first. Then you can have clipping on. That way it always stays together, and then you could smooth it out with the subdivision surface modifier. We'll put this on in a little bit, but for now I want to get the basic proportions down, and we can decide what we want to model first. I think in order to get the general proportions started, I want to work on this outer shell. It would potentially start as a cube, and then we would add some cuts into it and bring it inwards, and then we would smooth out these sides. It gets a little complicated with these circles, but we'll go ahead and cover some basic 3D modeling principles when it comes to sub-D modeling in circles. So this is both a beginner course and kind of an advanced course. That's why the first 2 episodes were boring as hell, and then you come out of this with a really cool 3D model. Okay, so before we go on any farther, we can go ahead and go to our file and learn a little bit about saving. I'm just going to go ahead and save what I was doing, but if you haven't saved yet, make your first save and call it something like the EXP S3 or Holographic Sight. Let's call it HoloSight. Cool. So like I had mentioned, I want to start on this basic outer shell first, and we know we have some buttons on this side and we have some buttons on this side, and I'm noticing 1 screw here and I notice 2 screws here. So it looks like we'll only have the privilege of working on the basic details on the outside, which is like the shell, and then later on we can sort of unmirror it and start adding these other details onto it. But let's just see if we can get the general shape down of this. What this is a dance between the front view, side view, clicking on our object, going into edit mode, and utilizing all those hotkeys we went over in the last episode. So I don't want you to get overwhelmed, and I really will try to explain this as best as possible. So the major goal for subdivision modeling is to keep our polygon count as low as possible. That way we don't have to select too many things. We can move it around and all these details will be smoothed out for us. If we start adding a ton of stuff, it's just going to get more and more complicated to get the controls that you need. As you notice, all I did was just add control loops. I'm starting to utilize the same controls over and over, which is grab, scale, rotate, extrude, getting a knife, and so on and so forth. We're playing with vertices, edges, and faces. And so I hope to make a lot more courses in the future where these basics have already been covered and you'll feel really confident to tackle whatever we do next. So I'll Control Z that and get our basic mirrored cube. What we do to one side is done to the other right now. So let's see if our reference images are set up correctly. I could just move this cube, and I'm looking at this bottom corner, and in X-ray mode, that is needed to get all the edges that are selected in the box select without having to change your camera angle every time. So I'm sticking to X-ray mode and I'm lifting it down, and I might bring this vertice in, this vertice out. And now let's check out the width in the front view, and it looks like it extends out all the way over here. They are a pretty similar height. It looks like our front one is a little bit taller, but it doesn't matter. So let's grab these front ones, bring it out. Let's just get the general proportions. If I move this vertice back, we can start looking at the shape a little better. I notice it goes up and then has an angle and then curves. So we know we have a spot here. We know we have a spot over here. Now let's grab this whole face and use the extrude tool with E to bring this back. And then we can flatten this side with scale and Y and 0. And I'm always trying to flatten my polygons so that I have a better idea of how I should be extruding my different vertices and edges. So this was completely flat, and it's really easy to now drag these vertices up. And we're extruding again. And we're just starting to build the basic formation of this. I'm adding another edge loop with Control R, and I'm bringing these vertices in so that now we are starting to follow this silhouette nicely. We can go back into the front view, and because we have X-ray selected, all these vertices should also go in on the X direction quite nicely. Notice that it's a little different on this side, so once we get past like what we consider stage 2, we're gonna have to unmirror this. I'll lift it up and let's scale it in on the Y axis. Bring these vertices in. And what we'll do is we'll add one control loop here. We'll bring it in, maybe even a little farther. And now we'll use Alt click to select the entire edge loop, and I'll press Control B. And now we're able to smooth out this portion right here. There's a little bit of curvature on this side, so I'm just going to use G and Y to bring each of those in. Once we match the side view, we could start focusing a little more on the height of this front one. So I'll select the front one and scale it up. Let's just scale it up in general. Just trying to see if I can match the height. And now I can go back into edit mode and drag all of this out a little bit more. So now in the front view, we can start dragging these in on the X direction. And what I'll do for this top is sort of find the in-between point and drag it down. And now it's a good opportunity for us to add edge loops in this direction. So I'll add two, let's add two for now. I'll add 2 edge loops, go to the front view, and we can lift these ones up on the Z axis. And let's make sure we have these a little bit straighter and more relaxed. So all we're doing is selecting vertices, edges, dragging them in and out. And as you'll notice, this sort of peaks outwards a little bit more. I think what we're going to try to do is add an edge loop here. And then I can potentially drag these ones and bring them outwards. Let's see where this outer edge might be. These top ones can go back. And that seems to match the curvature pretty well. So at this front view, so let's test out if our proportions would look okay with subdivision surface on. And like we did with the previous model, we can add some control loops to start tightening out edges. So notice that they get a little tighter on this corner. They get a bit tighter on this corner, so I could also drag it towards the front, drag it towards the back. And then I think I'm okay with not dragging it towards the top. I'll just move that vertice a little bit and smooth out this area. You know, it's totally okay to go off base. And if I turn off X-ray mode, it is definitely a bit tighter now. I think before we exit the mirror modifier, we should probably get our base inset in. So what I'm going to try to do is grab the front and back sides with the circle tool, with the circle selection tool. And I'm going to try to make an inset that tries to follow the shape of its hollow inside. So I'll actually even grab these bottom vertices. Let's make sure we got all of them and just grab them with circle select. I'll go into front view, isolate it, and press inset. Now, as you can see, it's insetting, but it's not insetting towards the center. All we have to do is press B, and it'll go through the boundary. So now we can play with that general thickness. So you could see some of the vertices went over, and that is a situation like the extrusion where overlapping faces are just unwanted. So we're going to grab these top ones, and we're just going to grab them in the Z direction and bring them down. We could possibly grab these ones as well and use double G to slide them, and this will even out that surface. So now we can see that we have these edges that follow the silhouette of this thick panel. So now I can grab, with the circle selection tool, our original faces, and I'm pretty sure we can just go ahead and delete them. So I'm grabbing everything we don't need, and I've deleted them. We're starting to build our shape pretty well. So we're going to make this a little bit easier on us, and for now, I'll delete the extra edge loops that we've done. This was more to see if our final version would smooth correctly, and it does. I've used Alt-click to select them. I'm going to dissolve these edges so they're gone now. Because what I want to do is grab perhaps actually just these faces, and I'll press Command I to invert that and delete these, because I want the entire face to be thick. So I'll go back to the front view, and I'll press a new keyboard shortcut called Alt-E. And this is like shrinking and fattening while also extruding at the same time. So it's called Extrude Faces Along Normals. And even though it's red, it is giving us the thickness that we want. So I'll press A, Alt-N, and I'll flip those normals. Now I think we can unmirror this and get that little extra nudge that we see on the side. So I'll go back into object mode, and I'll press Ctrl A on this mirror modifier to apply it. And now this is all one object. Go into our front view, and let's make sure we know what we're looking at. It looks like it just simply goes up, and then it does have that nudge out. So maybe we could scale this in a little bit to match it better. And I'll go into X-ray mode, and I'll start hunting down the best general silhouette for this. I'm using the rotate tool to start matching the edges of how these polygons would flow. And then I'm also going to make sure that we even out these vertices from the front view, because the more even your quads are, the general better time you're going to have with the subdivision process. So we want to make sure we don't make this unmirrored too much, but I'm happy to attempt to follow the actual edges of it better. And because we're in X-ray mode and we haven't done too much extreme modeling, it's totally okay that we're in this front view and moving everything together without breaking the model. So it's sort of like tracing, but that's the way it goes for more complex models. And I think even though it's an all skill levels course, I want you guys to be able to create something really interesting and cool. So beforehand, we had done control loops, and we totally have the option to do that if we want. However, there's also a different way to get the sharp edges we need from this model. And what we can do is we can go to edge mode and alt click and shift alt click the edges we would want to be sharp in this scenario, which are these corners, these edges, the back and front, and I think even these little edges over here, including these ones. And instead of adding control loops, I can go to item, and with these edges selected, I can use the mean crease slider over here and set it to 1. So that later on, we can either bevel these or go back and add control loops if you prefer that look. But for now, we're able to get all the control we need with just a couple of polygons, and it's smoothing itself out while also allowing us to have sharp corners with the crease tool. You don't always have to have this menu open. We could set it to 0, and we can press Shift E and drag, and that'll also set it to 1. So let's give it a quick confirmation on what we're looking at. The front view looks pretty good, and the side view looks okay, but I am willing to sort of flatten out some of these areas and just smooth it out to make our lives easier in the future. You know, even though they're unmirrored, it's good to try to examine what your edges are doing and try to relax them. It's a little bit of moving around, a little bit of grabbing, as long as it's nothing too critical. For example, if this looks bad from here, but then we realize it's just this side going down into it. But we could always still try to relax those. So even though these went in on the X direction, maybe we can bring them upwards. And maybe we can scale them on the Y. And that seems to offer a little bit smoother of a transition. As well, when I look over here, it looks like there is some creasing going on that might be better handled through control loops. So let's go to solid view, see how it looks. And I'll actually add a control loop here, and I'll add another one here. And that seems to do the tightening we need without having to crease it. So I actually am totally cool with the look of that. And I think because we added these ones, we could even uncrease these little edges. So it's sort of a balance between adding edge loops and having creases. So this one could actually use a control loop because it's a bit tighter. If we go to the side view and go X-ray, we could start rebuilding this shape a little bit. So this one's completely sharp, and maybe it shouldn't necessarily be like that. See, you're going to be able to have multiple methods when it comes to sharpening edges. So for now, I'll set it to 0, and I'll see what control loops it allows us to add. The reason why I go for crease first is because it's always nice to have less polygons to deal with. But once you start being a little bit more confident in your shape, you could even uncrease that and start adding some control loops. I may be underestimating the difficulty of what is called polygon flow, but if I go to the wireframe, notice that they are all following a single direction, and it allows me to add control loops without disturbing the model. It allows me to extrude pieces very cleanly. So I knew that it would be pretty difficult when we didn't have this interface to try to like rebuild it with certain other methods. Like perhaps if this were completely gone, this is something I do in more advanced subdivision modeling, is if I delete it, sometimes there's just no other option but to grab some vertices and extrude them in and use the F key to start filling in faces. But because it's a little bit of a hacky process, you want to make sure you extrude the right edge first, then grab 4 little vertices, and then you want to make sure you're not, overdoing these control loops. So in a situation where I'm building faces like this, having these control loops here at the side just makes my life a lot harder. And that is a situation where I'd prefer definitely to just crease these edges to know what I'm looking at, and I don't have to add a ton of different faces one by one. So that's a little lesson in just trying to observe what the best tool for the job is. I knew that with that flat sheet, we could just extrude the whole thing. And knowing when to crease and when to subdivide is sort of a dance as well. Or knowing when to crease and when to add edge loops. It's just a game theory. So now we lost this bottom edge loop, and I can drag it down and it'll start to sharpen itself out. I'll see how sharp it gets at this corner over here. And go back and forth between X-ray mode. It seems like we only have one edge here, and I'm going to turn wireframe back off. And now we can even sharpen this side a little bit too. Now I'm just giving it a good old-fashioned ocular pat down, seeing if this respects the shapes that were originally in the reference, and they pretty much do, except we have to tighten this corner as well with some control loops. And we might up the difficulty just a little bit here, and we'll notice that if I drag all these edge loops out, make sure we get them all, we'll notice it kind of dips inwards before it stops. So I think we can handle that with an edge loop at the right location. It seems like it'll do the right job for us, and I'm pretty sure that'll go on throughout the whole thing. And we can add a control loop right here. So this is one of those situations I was talking about where you're nearly rebuilding this entire piece. So I'm grabbing these faces and I just deleted them. Let's make sure we got all these side ones. And so while this isn't a perfect method, what I'm going to try to do instead of having to rebuild each face one by one is I'll grab these faces right here and press a new key called Y, and that separates them. So with the snapping tool, maybe I can get vertex snapping and I can pick a new mode, and the mode I'm looking for is active. That way I know which vertex is the active one that's going to be snapping this whole thing. So I want to take it from here to here. And I'll just press, like I said, good habit to keep this off. I'll press G and Control, and it just snapped to that whole thing. However, we are going to turn on vertex snapping and make sure that all of these are snapped in the right location. So I just moved a vertex, held Control. I'm just making sure that these are all in a decent spot where they would be merged. I don't have auto merge on, and I'll merge them by distance. Right about now, actually, I'll press A, M, and then merge by distance. Now I can take my edge tool and grab in between these and press F. And with that F2 add-on, I can press F again, and F again, and it just completed that whole edge loop for us. We can even add a new control loop with Control R, and we just tightened that edge as well. So it looks like we might have a little bit of a bug here. I'm not too sure. Or maybe we should just bring this in a little bit more. And it looks like I just need to merge these little extra vertices if they didn't perfectly align. So to make the actual front and back sides sharper, now we can add a new control loop and sharpen these sides up. And as long as it doesn't disturb the actual form, we should be good to go. When it comes to cylindrical or very circular objects, we wouldn't want a ton of edge loops that break up the actual curvature. So notice this just got really sharp compared to the smooth curvature of this. But as long as they're following the edge flow nicely, and because this is a pretty mechanical shape, adding all of these control loops is no problem. Maybe there's a situation later on where we're going to have to be a little bit more careful with the control loops, but for now that worked out perfectly. I do notice the buttons are a little thick here, but I think this is the correct thickness on this side, and that is our shell. I think next we might go into the process of creating screws and creating these circular patterns on this shell, but that is amazing progress. So if you made it this far, really amazing job. I'd love to see you in the next video, and I'll see you there.